everybody. Welcome to Anime Sickos. It's the podcast for geniuses and the only podcast. We, on Anime Sickos, we like to take a look at the four pillars of modern misery, those being anime, gaming, posting, and jobs. I am Tom, an anime sicko.
I'm Joe, an anime sicko.
We got a guest, but first, we got to thank someone who gave us money. Because we're going to give the guest money. That's a horrible burden on us. But
this is the economy. We're doing economy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
there's a graph.
This is what Marx was talking about.
Yeah, he was always like, those guys are doing the economy.
Yeah,
that's what he was always writing about.
Yeah. I read the manifesto. It's mostly about that. So we got to thank our new patron, Allison McDonald. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Allison.
Not only did Allison give us money, but she commented on episode 3 of Sicko Shock 2, the Stack Overflow episode. That it was the one that took Anime Sickos from a podcast where you listen if the other podcasts don't have anything interesting today to definitely one of the main podcasts. So that's like better than
That's
money.
The big league when you get moved up in the rotation in the car.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's a big deal.
Also, before we introduce our guest, so our guest, I'm going to go nuts. We've had like big-ish names on before. This is the first time I'm like a Twitter about it. I'm like, oh. Our guest, in preparation, I listened to an episode he was on a podcast called Gaming in the Wild that was very sort of artistically minded and serious with like...
Yeah, Tom was intimidated because they're smart.
Yeah, so I want to tell a great joke that I thought up recently to sort of set the tone. Here it goes. A man and his son were driving in the car when their car stalls on the train tracks. Just at that moment, a train starts bearing down on them and they struggle to get out of the car in time. The train collides with the car, killing the father instantly and leaving the son in critical condition. He is rushed to the hospital, and to save his life, he needs emergency surgery right now. As the surgeon turns to the operating table, they gasp and say, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son. How is this possible?" I have 3 punchlines. 1, the doctor was wrong.
It's wrong.
Sometimes doctors can be wrong.
They're wrong a lot. They have to pay insurance in anticipation of them being very wrong.
It's punchline number 2. How is this possible? Son's got 2 gay dads. What are you talking about? It's 2024. Oh. What are you, Governor of Texas Greg Abbott, you bigot? Get with it.
And 3?
The doctor is very drunk and is looking for an excuse not to do it. Now, you might be thinking, this is a pretty easily disprovable lie. That's not going to work. Well, he's been drinking quite a lot. This is the best he can come up with.
Also, he's not trying to get sober. He's trying to get sober enough. He just needs to buy time.
That's true. Anyway, that's my great joke. I thought that up when I was walking the park, and I had to send it to Joe in a voice memo because I was going to lose it forever, and I couldn't bear that. That being said, tone set. Let's introduce our guest, Remy Sue. Remy, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Did you like my terrible joke?
I did like it. I was trying not to laugh during the joke because I did not want to reveal my presence until now.
I was trying not to laugh during your joke is a thing all comedic people love to hear. This is the best possible outcome.
I was trying my best.
Hey, can you do our podcast? Can you also just not talk for the first 10 minutes while I do a very long-winded joke? Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Remy is the creative director on a recently released computer video game by the name of 1000 Times Resist that I just got to say, buy that fucking game. Like, everyone do it. Like, it's so good. Like, here's how good it is. I finished the game. I saw the credits roll, and the first name on it was Remy Sue, and I'm like, I gotta ask that guy to go on podcast. And then he said yes, and I'm like, wow.
This was my first visual novel. That's how good this is. Unless you count me figuring out what happened in all the Fate Stay Nights by reading the wiki, but this was like my first legit VN and a
nice.
kick-ass opener, in my opinion.
Yeah, Joe, being a new father, was not able to complete the game. Unlike me, a motherfucker with nothing but time.
Yes, congratulations, by the way. I heard about You being a new father.
Thank you. He was slapping at my Steam Deck when I was getting traumatic backstory.
Yes.
So I'm not going to make you say that unless you want to say the pitch, although I bet you said it many, many times. 1,000 Times Resist is a game where you walk around and read a story that kicks ass. I should say read, but it has voice acting that's actually like really very good.
It sounds like actual real people speaking. It is not musical theater voice. It's real people talking.
Yeah, that we really tried to make sure that was the case.
Thank you very much for doing that because, like, especially because we've done some voice over directing, like in a hobbyist sort of way for our funny little audio dramas. And like the voice actors out there are like insanely good, but like I think it's like one of those things like the evils of capitalism drips down to all of us. Like the thing to do if you want to make money is talk like this. Oh, you really got to put a lot into it, and it's like please don't do that. That sounds wrong.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that a lot of the voice actors who they're recording in the booth that I'm recording in now. This is the same setup that we recorded in. And, when they come in, they're from theater and they just kind of push their voice. They're used to pushing their voice to the back of the stage. And the very first thing, we're just like, okay, well, you don't have to. Like, this is a situation where we can literally hear. Like I can talk like this and you can hear me. But literally, I don't know, in real life, nobody could hear what I was saying in that regard. But so that was something that we tried to orient everybody around really quickly when they came in. Because I agree. It's tough. Like, I wonder, I'm not a professional voice actor, but I know that it's so funny that it's kind of been that way. Like, as you say, it's like drips down to all of us. Like, I wonder why that has become vogue or like that has become kind of the way to do it.
I'm interested, and it sort of makes sense that actual theater people would have the theater voice because in that they're correct to do that. Like in the theater, you must have that voice. But like the professional voice actors who have like that stagey voice, it is just because that's what they're asked to do. And like and you can see it when they're asked to do something else. They can do a natural performance and it sounds amazing. But it's just
so good.
I think it's because the big thing that makes money is anime and video games, which generally
are yelling shonen protagonists. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's kind of really interesting because this is an anime-ish podcast, right? So like, we can delve into this a little bit. Like, you have. I don't really watch a lot of anime with English dub. Like I know some people like watch with Japanese dub and then they go watch the English dub, and I'm like, whatever.
It's a lot of time.
But like if you go listen to how Japanese actors are being cast or some of the Japanese deliveries are being delivered, some of it is so interesting, some of it is so strange. But then when you go to the English dub, it's like that is really not the case. They're not doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's always, I don't know, maybe the curse from the very early days when they were just like not even doing dubbing, they were just like, making up the script.
You're just talking over what they think Piccolo is saying.
Yeah.
Like if you go back and listen to the Yu Yu Hakusho English dub, like can you imagine getting away with the lead shonen protagonist vocal performance like Yusuke has? He sounds so real. He sounds like a guy from life. Like that can't happen today. And again, it's not because like today's actors are terrible. It's because it sells. They know, like, we've looked at the charts, and if you talk like this, it gets more popular because it's familiar.
I am immediately thinking of like one of the common themes in the game is the apartment, and it's just like none of the dialogue works there if anyone had anything resembling a stagey voice. It's very quiet, it's very intimate, there's a lot of hush stuff through the wall as well. It is kind of funny to imagine just like the most like, oh no, like just Mickey Mouse-esque reading of everything, but like no, this works because you have people actually speaking kind of like in a way that is normal.
Yes, yeah. Even if you think, I think a lot about, this is a good example of it, The Wind Rises, and Anno, getting cast as the main character, and then you hear Anno's delivery, and it's just like, oh, this is strange, or like this feels real in a way that it was kind of really impossible otherwise, because I don't really think Anno could have done the stage voice that we're all talking about. Yeah. He's just kind of like, I don't know, mumbling into the microphone.
There's a lot to be said for realistic mumbling. I was supposed to be describing what the game 1000 Times Resist was. In the future, everyone lives in a big bunker underground, ? We don't know.
And it's good. There are no problems.
There's no problems. Everyone is a clone of the All-Mother, just like it should be. There are 6 main sisters. One is Principal, who's red. And then we have Watcher, Knower, Fixer, Healer, and Bang Bang Fire.
Bang Bang Fire. Sick name.
They all have special roles that they're named after, and they wear different colors. And then there are sort of not quite their sister clones called Shells that sort of help them out. And everyone's doing great, and it's fine. And in the first scene of the game, your character Watcher kills the All-Mother because she hates her very much. And so that's not a spoiler, because it's, again, the first thing that happens.
It's like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
In.
My sort of like big thing, obviously I love this. Like, I love this game. We call it a visual novel. It's not quite, because you do move around in space and like with a third person character, which is a very good decision. But it's I call it a visual novel to prime people for, like, don't expect, like, to be fighting or doing, like, Mario levels. Like, you're playing this for the story, and the story's so, like, again, I said it before, like, buy this game. Like, you must do it. It's so goddamn good. And the thing that hit me about, like, this is why it's so goddamn good, and, like, this is why this is special, and I have to talk to the people who made it, is the first game I've played since Xenogears that gave me the vibes of, like, this is like Xenogears, except, like, when I was done with Xenogears, I'm like, there's never gonna be a game that gives me Xenogears vibes. And the fact that this did is, like, chilling in a great. It was like, oh yes. Remy, are you familiar with Xenogears? You know what I talk about when I say this?
I Xenogears? What is this? No, I do know Xenogears. And okay, I mean, I can go back. Like, I mean, I played Xenogears when I was very young, so it's a huge kind of fever dream blur to me.
Yeah.
And like, if you ask me to recall, like, I have to play it again because I have some more time now, but. I do want to, like, play it again, I guess, as an adult, and see what's going on. But I have to say, the thing that left the biggest imprint on me, probably because I played it at just the right age, also was Xenosaga on PS2. I remember I rented that game from Blockbuster.
Classic.
And
for the funny rental, like, I can knock this out in 5 days.
Yeah. Well, it was a 2-day rental.
Oh man!
I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's how it goes, right? Like, you would get all these, because I was super into JRPGs, and then you would get all of these. You would go to the Rogers Video here in Canada, and then also Blockbuster, and you would have your 48-day rentals and your 72-hour rentals and your, like, whole week 7-day rentals or whatever. And yeah, Xenosaga is new, so it was like 48 hours. And I played 48 hours of it, and it blew my mind. And then, of course, I extended the rental, which was costly. And then eventually, I guess I bought it or something. I can't remember what happened. But I just remember Xenosaga just being, like, aesthetically also very... I don't know, imprinted on me in a way that was more so than, say, even Xenogears. And I think part of it was just that, Xenogears was a PS1 game, and PS1 was my first console, and at the time I was just like, oh, I want to play these 3D games. And Final Fantasy VII I had already played through Final Fantasy VII before playing Xenogears, so it was weird to me. Like, I had not played Final Fantasy VI at the time. I was, like, super basic, right? So I was just, like, needed my JRPGs to be 3D.
Yeah. That's the time period.
I have to say, I haven't played any of the Xenoblade games, which is I Yeah,
I haven't. The only game I've played is Gears. I will tell you why I got Xenogears vibes from 1,000 Times Resist, because there's not a lot of like explicit connections. The connection I got was the thing that blew my mind about Xenogears, because as a video game, it kind of like totally sucks ass because the combat system's not very good, and you also don't get to do it very much because they didn't make most of it. The thing that blew my mind is the way that the story is told. It's constantly in this weird place where the game is not being honest with you, and that's the wrong word, but I'm going to go with it. It's not being honest with you with what the story is about. It presents you this story, and it starts the wheels spinning, and then when you hit a significant point, it zooms out, and you realize that actually the story has been about all this shit also. And what you've been seeing is just like a drop in the bucket. And when I say it's not being honest with you, that's not the right word, because everything that happened was legit, and all of the larger context you didn't know about, retrospectively, that was there. I just didn't have the tools to know that. And the thing that made Xenogears so good is that shit happened so many times. And when similar events occurred in 1,000 Times Resist, I was hooting and simply going nutty.
Nice.
So you mentioned in the other podcast that this game was written and produced one chapter at a time, in the sense that chapter 1 was like done, or at least close to done, I assume, before chapter 2 began.
Yeah.
How the fuck?
It's so funny because it was like, I guess that's we were new to game development, and it's also just like, I guess that's not a normal thing to do. When to us it made a lot of sense, because like we were trying to, at least as the writers, we were trying to think of this as like, kind of a TV show, or for ourselves at least, even though everybody would play it all at once, or like maybe more of like the episodic games that kind of fizzled out in the 2010s, like
the Telltales.
Yeah. Or that method of delivery. I remember being very excited by that method of delivery, but then, apparently it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we made it chapter by chapter, and I think one of the things that, process-wise, we were always trying to push with each chapter was that, okay, let's put ourselves in a place that makes us kind of scared about what to do next as writers. If we're not scared, and if we already know what's going to happen, we find that, at least for ourselves as writers, we just can't work.
Yeah.
Like we find that the work that we make when we do know already, and we're just like kind of moving to a point, is not exciting for us, and then it would not maybe be exciting for the audience. And so like that was kind of maybe one of the big process differences making this game, is that we were just always trying to put ourselves in a scenario story-wise where we were afraid of what would come next, or like, did we just run out of stuff to do? And I think, one of the common examples that I bring up is that, at the end of chapter 1, we had no idea that Watcher was going to turn in Fixer. And it was one of those, okay, I guess this is like a huge spoiler podcast, so I could just talk about everything. Yeah. And so that was one of those things where when we got there, we were like, the more traditional thing to do, it's like, okay, well, this whole game now, it will be about her trying to not turn her in or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But then to have her immediately kind of turn her in, it was like,
it's chill. Actually, it was a very easy decision.
Yeah. And like, it told us a lot about her in a way that we didn't know, but it kind of made sense for her. And then also it put us in a place where we're like, oh shit, what now? Like, what do we do?
That's so good.
And that happened repeatedly.
The thing about the chapter by chapter development and writing process that really hit me is that if you play this game, you will note very quickly that it is told in a very fractured and non-sequential fashion. We are zipping and zopping through the timeline and through different points of view very frequently. As a result, information is doled out to you in a drip. You start out and you got questions. What's the deal? How come things is like this?
Everybody's talking about this all-mother shit.
How come dislike this? And you are always being like, the game is not cruel. It is always giving you information, but it is giving it to you obliquely, and it is not giving you the answer that you want. It's giving you like shades and details on the side. And for me, it was like I could not get over how engaging this discovery process was. It brings to mind, there's this great quote by Benny Safdie about the curse, which is like, the meaning of the curse is there, but we wanted to make it so that you have to get it. It's like a drawer with no handle. It's easy to open, but you have to figure out how to open it, and everyone's going to figure out a different way. The gameplay is using your brain with the fucking words, folks. It's so goddamn good. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. How did you like know when to, like, now we're going to cut back to Hong Kong, or like now we're going to go and see from the point of view of, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but there was a certain faction of people quotes, entities that I did not think we were going to get a point of view chapter about, and then we did, and I was like, oh my, that was a Xenogears moment for me. It's like, are you really telling me we get to see from the point of view of Redacted? Right. So like, for me, I guess like I can understand the process of like writing chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
If it is like just a straight ahead narrative, but to do that and also sort of like break it into shards and make a mosaic, how was that? Like,
can I ask a follow-up, a sort of contributing thing here? Is when you're doing this chapter by chapter thing, the thing I kept, as Tom is speaking about this, it's like, do you save stuff, or is like the goal to leave every good idea on the table, or not on the table, but like to put everything into that chapter, and everything goes into now, and there's not so much like future mindset planning? Like, how do we just make this chapter good?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both. So like I would say that, you know, sometimes we would, like we knew, I mean, like even going in, we did have like a macro understanding, like literally 3 points of like, okay, well, this is maybe got to happen, this is maybe got to happen, and then this is maybe got to happen. Like we knew that the murder had to happen. That was like maybe like the all-mother murder was like the one thing. And even that one, say, originally, actually, we did not start the game with that. That was one instance where we did like kind of do chapters 1 to 5, and then we're like, okay, you know what, fuck it, let's move chapter 5, that scene, into chapter 1.
Right decision.
Yeah, and we thought about it a lot, actually. There was quote, like debate about, you know, was it a good idea? In the end, I think it was a good idea.
It was it was an absolute attention grabber, because I was tired. I was booting it up. I just put my son to bed. I was like, all right, we're gonna do a game that's reading based mostly. Yeah. That's fine. And then when the stabbing happened, it was like, okay, I sat up a little. I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm all in.
And another instance of Xenogearsian like curtain reveal. Like, you thought this is what you thought this all was, but it's not. I'm not gonna get too into the spoilers, because as much as we say spoilers are fake, like, this game is so good and has reveals so fucking impactful, I'm not gonna say everything. But you think because of that, you know, the first scene is Watcher killing the All-Mother. You think like this is a game about how we got there. And then you play the game, and the game shows how you got there, and then it keeps going, and you realize, oh, this is not a game about how we got there. Like, and that, oh, it's so good. So all of which is say, right decision.
Oh, thank you. I think it's interesting because, like, you know, we only felt confident to put the All-Mother murder at the beginning when we were already kind of a little bit into what happens afterwards. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we were like a little bit more confident, going like, oh, you know, like, as you know, as we were discovering along with, you know, the players as they journey through the game, we're like, oh, maybe this is not what it was all about. Mm-hmm, you know. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And like that was something where that's where, you know, as you were saying, do we throw everything on the table? And there are a couple chapters where we throw everything on the table. And, you know, this is, again, spoilers, so like I guess if you want to skip this part of the podcast. But chapter 4 is one where we're just like, okay, let's throw everything on the table. Chapter 5, of course, is also, and then chapter actually everything after chapter 5 It was like always, let's throw everything on the table. Because like, to a certain extent, there was and this is kind of the thing where, from chapters 1 to 5, there were things that we had to hold back as much as we were trying to push and throw everything on the table. But then after we were, free from chapter 5 and kind of reaching that point of inevitability, because you do set that up as going to happen, we were freed, and then we were throwing everything on the table. Okay. We were truly throwing everything on the table in a way that was exciting to us. And sorry, I feel like I forgot the first question. It was added on.
The first question was to the point of like, I can understand how a chapter by chapter writing process, like that, it's easy for me to wrap my head around if we were telling the story in a straightforward way, but to also have it be heavily non-chronological, that's just, to me, that seems so hard. And to do that without like an outline, and like we'll hear, like I can get nutty with the structure, but I know that these are the bullets I gotta hit that give me like something to reach for in the chaos. To do it, just be like, let's just go nuts. Let's see what we can come up with. It's so cool. It really works, folks.
It's like really kind of fun because I think some of the writers are really fan-minded in a way that we have our own chronologies that we obsess about. You can, you know what I'm talking about, right? So then, one, for example, for me, I'm relatively versed in Star Trek chronology, right?
Oh hell yeah, star dates.
Yes, and so like being like having that kind of brain, or like growing up to have that kind of brain, it's kind of fun for us to be like, we don't really 100% have this whole chronology before it's made, but we understand there are points on it, and where there's empty space to jump in and put something interesting there. Because in largely, even when you go back and think about, especially something like Star Trek, like they're not 100%. They don't like map out the chronology first, right? Yeah. They're just filling in, what may have happened, and stuff passes into lore almost accidentally, right? Yeah. And so having that kind of, growing up with this kind of like millennial lore obsessed brain was helpful for us when we were writing, to like, okay, yeah, we can kind of freely float the chronology and just throw darts at it, Yeah. And I think one thing that we kind of tried to always do is play out the most interesting scene that we can at any given point in time, as opposed to, and one of the reasons why we even have the time jump mechanic in the game is that it does allow us to diegetically actually move directly from one interesting thing to another interesting thing without having to be like, okay, well, there's this build up into this, right? And it has its own kind of build up that you can create by jumping around these points.
Yeah. It's just cut out. Why waste time on the connective tissue between the juicy bits when we could just have all bits, like, and just have it be perfect. Not perfect, but just like the hit.
This is something that Adventure Time, I think, taught me. And it's kind of like, Adventure Time's like 12 minutes long or whatever, 10 minutes long per episode. At least they used to be. And it was a real revelation to, like, in that show, maybe because it was animated driven, maybe because it was boarded as opposed to scripted, that they would be like, we need to go here. And then Jake would like, let's go now. And then the next scene is like, we're here, like in a more traditional way, it would be like, well, why did he want to go there? Yeah. Or like, like what's this whole kind of logic and reasoning through the characters to get there, when, that show was just like, hey, we're going to go here now.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not in the same kind of world as Adventure Time. Like, we don't have the same affordances narratively. So doing the time jumping mechanic was really much this. Was just like, okay, let's find a diegetic reason that we can do this.
Yeah, that's bad. I also, now that you've been talking through this, especially knowing that post Chapter 5, you were sort of leaving it all on the table, like, let's do all of our good ideas. No more holding back. I sort of am like going back. I'm like, okay, I see now how that translates. Because, as I said, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but there are chapters from point of view factions that I'm just like, I thought that we were never going to get a lot of lore about them. I thought, like, that is a background detail that is always going to be a little mysterious. Cool. Like, I have enough to know, like, the gist of them, but I'll never know it all, and that's, to me, just fine. And then we get, like, the chapter with, I'll say it because you won't know what I mean, with the 50, and I'm like, there's no way we're going to get a chapter about the 50. I'm like, oh, fuck. Okay, and they're leaving it all, like... So beautiful. This is, you see, we talk shit about lore a lot, and correctly, but this is when lore is useful. This is how, like, Mad Max Fury Road is all action, but it also has, like, you know, Bibles full of lore, because, like, just having it there is like you have so much ammunition to do insane shit with, because everything you do is just like, you can just tell there is so much meaning draped in this. Even if they don't tell me what it is, I'm going nuts. Okay, well, I need to say this. This is, I'm going to try not to keep gushing too much. Buy this fucking game. Buy 1000 Times Resist, folks. After I wrote and produced our audio drama series, Sicko Shock 2, I said that I'm going to start saying I'm one of the best comedy writers in the country, you know, sort of positive thinking thing, because I think I did a really fucking good job on that shit. And the first time since the release of Sicko Shock 2, that made me think, like, maybe... no, it's not enough. Like, actually, it wasn't good enough. It's not bad. It's just like I can't be happy with this. Was playing 1000 Times Resist, because, like, the process that you're describing and the product that you made, it's just like, how did fucking people do that? And it's just, I'm inspired. I love it. If you folks listening out there, it's almost episode 200. You obviously like me and get my thing. You understand what it means when I say that you must buy this game? Go buy this game. Sorry, I just had to get that out.
Thank you. No, thanks. I mean, it means a lot to us that it, like, inspires these things in other artists, because, like, you know, that's how we all continue to make art, is that we kind of need, you know, and like I can't remember, like, I think I had this feeling when I think I was watching Sonny Boy. And that's something we can talk about later too. But like, I watched Sonny Boy and I was like, oh man, this was really good. I gotta think about my life.
I saw you wrote that in the doc, and I had not heard of it, and looked it up, and was like, oh shit, this does seem good.
Yeah, and other things where it's just like, you know, even, you know, theater shows that I would see where I was just be like, oh my god, like I do have to think about. Or, like, I don't know, just something that makes you want to make things, right? Like, that's why, that's like, we always kind of want, at least as artists, you know, why do we continue to see things, watch things, listen to things, whatever? It's like, we just want to find this thing that makes us want to make things, and that, you know, we like, or gives us whatever this affect or energy is, right?
So, Remy, I got to ask you, we've been having a great conversation so far. It's been lovely. I feel like we said some genius words. That goes without saying, that we all are geniuses here. But one thing that we haven't discussed, that we really need to, it's the elephant in the room. Are you an anime sicko?
Yes.
Okay,
I think it's pretty obvious.
Just talking about Sonny Boy. I mean.
Sonny.
You were saying all the Xeno games. It's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
You rented a game with Saga in the title, thinking you're going to finish it in 2 days.
Yes. I don't know. I'm always on this, you know, chasing the dragon for this, like, every couple of anime seasons, there's like a show that really, usually it's like a limited run original kind of anime, whatever, one season, 12 episodes, that just, like, you know, make me rethink life a little bit. I mean, Sonny Boy was one of them. You know, I just recently, quote unquote, watched the Pluto anime, the adaptation of Pluto, and it's so good. And, you know, before that, I think I was just, I can't remember which season it was. Maybe it was like a couple, half a year ago, another year. Time is strange to me now. Yeah. But Vinland Saga, season 2 of Vinland Saga, and everybody's like, and I love the discourse about, fan discourse about this farm arc, and how people just can't get into the farm arc, but because
it's not the murder one, because it's
not the murder one, but like Vinland Saga, the farm arc is like when they, because I didn't read the manga, right? Because I've somehow restrained myself from reading the manga, and when they started the farm arc after season 1, I was like, oh my god, this is like actually the real show.
Yes.
This is what it's all about.
That's
right?
People who don't like the farm arc are basically what the translation. It doesn't matter what words they're saying. The translation is
filter.
The translation is I have a low quality brain. I'm not as advanced a person as you, the farm arc enjoyer. I mean, because I haven't seen
cartoonish because it's just like, the killing kid we've been along with for how many hours, he's different now. Isn't that something?
And it seems like a really interesting thing. I didn't read that much into Vinland Saga, or like read much about like the production of it as a manga or whatever, or the mangaka, and like it does, for at least from artist to artist, like kind of like recognizing season 2, like farm arc feels like where he wanted to begin the story and what he wanted to actually be doing. But of course, you're a mangaka who has to sell this weekly manga. Yeah, you got to draw some fights. And so I think that first season really felt like, I mean, much like, first season of Attack on Titan and the first couple of, volumes of Attack on Titan are much like this too. It's like very much an action adventure, but then like Attack on Titan spoilers, right? Like people also complained about the Marley arc when it was happening. But that was also like, oh, this is what they've been trying to do.
Yes.
to do,
Well, you can't just do that out of the gate. You got to build up some juice.
Yeah, you have to go on the journey. See, I have only read the Vinland Saga manga, and especially with the manga, I don't know if it's like this in the anime, but in the manga, they do one of my favorite tropes, which is a character turning directly to the camera and saying the main theme of the show out loud. They do it because it sounds when I say it like that, like it's dumb, but like when that happens, I go like, yes, the main theme. It's when in the very beginning, our little kid protagonist is like, Daddy, I want to kill with my sword. And he's like, why? Yeah. Who are you going to kill with that sword? And it's like, my enemies. And again, the dad looks directly at the camera and says, this is what every chapter is going to be about, folks.
Yeah.
You have no enemies. Oh. There is no one on this world you should hurt.
So I lost my shit when that happened. I mean, this is going to be Vinland Saga. This is like just going to be spoilers all over the place.
Yeah, do it.
So if you like haven't watched Vinland Saga, I mean, when he repeats it in the end of the farm arc, after finally truly understanding it,
it's so good. It makes me cry,
getting the shit kicked out of him. Vinland Saga. I was like trying to grab my friends. I was trying to grab the writers. Like, you have to watch Vinland Saga, and they're like, well, but how many seasons is it? It's like, oh, but yeah, you have to watch the first season of it, but you have to get to the farm arc. You have to get to the farm so we can talk about Vinland Saga. They didn't, but it's okay, I guess.
Oh fuck, yo, I just had a brain blast. Vinland Saga 1,000 times resist connection. One thing that's so interesting about Vinland Saga is that we know that our hero Thorfinn does not succeed. Spoilers, his goal is, I want to go to Vinland and start a new country in a new land with no more violence and hate. Because violence and hate, which he experienced in spades in season 1, left him a very, very damaged person. And the only way he sort of becomes himself is to leave that behind. And, I live in Vinland, and there's lots of bullshit. It didn't work. Thorfinn failed. But, despite that, his... And I think people tell him, like, Thorfinn, you're going to fail. And I think he kind of knows that, too. But he has to try as much as he can. Record scratch 1,000 times resist. That's that, too. People are resisting in that game 1,000 times. And it never gets good. And there is a part where Iris's father turns directly to the camera and says the theme of the game, which is, it doesn't matter that our resistance didn't work. What matters is that people know that this wasn't natural. They know it was done to us, and we resisted. This is like one of my favorite themes in media, which is like, we're gonna be doing this forever, and it'll never end. But it's so important that you do it anyway, because this is what being alive's all about. I love this shit.
Yes. I was gonna say exactly the same thing.
Okay.
It's what it's about. Being alive is what's up. Yeah, it's what it's about. And that is so clear in the end of that farm arc, where it's just like, because he doesn't really succeed. Like a bunch of people got on the farm.
Yeah.
You know, before this even kind of happens.
Yeah. His intervention is not well timed.
Yeah. Yes.
What Tom said earlier, and also just how you were reiterating that the farm arc is like the good part. I'm reminded, and it's not quite the same because it's not such discreet of a thing, but whenever I read about people talking about Berserk, there's always an idiot opinion, which is like, Berserk starts and he's like, Mr. Grimdark guy, I was birthed out of a corpse that's hung from a tree. And then like as it goes on, it's like, I have a little friend now who's annoying. And it's like, they say that like, well, where's the cool stuff? Why is he? It's like, no, him having an annoying child around him is like the part that matters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, like Guts cutting the head off a huge guy is like, I think this is the how you translate these low quality brain people's thoughts is they want to see the character do the thing they do. So, like, what does Guts do? He cuts the head off a big guy.
Also, uses his Mega Man arm at close range. They do that, like, 5 times at the start, and it's good every time.
They want to just see the character do the thing they do. They want to see Thorfinn use his 2 little daggers and cut a guy's head off. They want to see the character do the thing they do. Whereas a true genius like us wants to see the character do something they don't do.
I want to see Goku do a driver's test. I want to see Piccolo do it too.
Yeah. I mean, that's... Yeah.
I don't want to jump around too much, but isn't this like literally why every Yakuza game is so fucking funny? Because it's just like, okay, now Kiryu's going to do this. and it's funny because he's this stoic honor guy, and he's approaching it with 100% intent and sincerity, and it's slot car racing.
As we're saying, like, you just kind of want to go see people do new things. Like, why are you watching? I don't know what this is, like the remnant of. This kind of sense of perpetual unchanging. Maybe it was like in the 90s, we had, television shows that were largely pressing the reset button all the time.
Yeah.
That's like, I think of 90s, like superhero stuff like that. Is sort of that loop. Like they have to be broadcasted and there can be no context before because it has to fit into any time slot. Yeah. And as a result, I assumed that like not everyone saw that as like correct and good, but like maybe that's what people want. People want a contextless thing all the time, which means stuff can't change.
Counterpoint: we're all huge fans of The Simpsons. What is The Simpsons? But characters do the same thing every time.
Yeah,
and I love that shit.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I think like that's like the kind of point of the show, at least in its more cynical seasons. I'm gonna get full Simpsons here now. Like, yeah, seasons 5 and 6, like the David Merkin era, like that was his.
Can I ask
obsession.
A question? Is this the controversy over the principal episode? Did that happen then?
No, that happened in season 9. It was like one of these leftovers from the Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein era. God, here we go. But season 6 and season 5, I think David Merkin had come in as a new showrunner, and they had a whole staff turnover. I think like one of the only people that like stayed was Conan O'Brien at the time, and he had come in with this kind of take where it's like, yeah, people don't learn, and if you watch season 5, season 6, they truly don't learn, right? Like and then part of it is like a little bit of a jab of the form and the context of The Simpsons is that, yeah, of course you it's not a serialized show. And it's constantly, it is resetting. But much of that was about how humans truly just can't seem to learn, and I find that hilarious. It's so funny. I mean, obviously super tragic, but like extremely funny that people don't learn. Yeah,
Cycles
I could
continue.
go on.
A singular
Cycles
theme
go on.
that never ends. Like, I mean, it's
Yeah.
really a well with unlimited depth.
Well, I'm having a brain blast once again. Isn't that what I was just talking about with Vinland Saga and Thousand Times Resist? Cycles that never end. We never learn,
Yes.
but we have to try anyway.
Yes.
We have to carry that weight, folks.
Yes.
God, what a good game. So here's something that I have to say. This is not exactly... So I've been super praiseworthy. You know I love this game. So keep that in mind when I say this shit.
Yeah.
It's been like an incredible burden on me to say the name of the game correctly.
We say it wrong all the time. We say 1001 X Dalmatians. We say 1000 X Hunter.
I say 1,000 times Gex. I say 3,000 times Bape.
But it's like I saw the game come up in my Steam like queue before Tom even told me about it, and I said I was like, "That's a name. That's a name."
It's the first on the Steam list. It's the first game in my library.
Yeah, that one was by accident, but we benefit from that happy accident.
So sorry, we interrupted you. You were talking about your publisher, which is
they internally call it a 1K XR because they like of course it's like this title is like really not meant to be said a lot, right? And it's one of those funny things that like I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, and it was like, the title came. I don't know. I was just like walking around and going to my car in the parking lot, and then this was many years before I even considered making a game. It like popped into my head, and I like kind of wrote it down in my notes. And I do keep a collection of just titles because I impossibly cannot name something after I start it, and usually the title is like the first seed of like, okay, well maybe this tells me something about what this thing is. And it kind of grows out from there. But then not having a title and then having to title it afterwards, it never works for me. And then also usually the project kind of implodes a little bit. And yeah, so it's funny because it's a title that I think is memorable in the fact if you look at it or read it, the shape of it you may remember, or you may remember not knowing how to say it. And but yeah, that's one of those things. I for some reason I never thought about the utility of people having to say it. I don't know why.
I mean, I know why, because you're in the weeds, man. You can't think. That's a publisher's decision. Speaking of, so I want to talk about this because this is interesting to me. So you, if I'm gleaning correctly from the information that's out there, you are not like a video game guy in terms of your career at large. You do a lot. You do theater. I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah.
And I assume the rest of your team at Sunset Visitor is of a similar background.
Yeah. So it's like half and half. There's a half of us from the performing arts, more specifically, kind of like experimental theater and like kind of wild, random stuff. Not random, but like wild things. And then the art director, Kodai, he has a kind of illustration 3D background, and he was primarily working in VFX before this. And the programmer, Colin, he's the one that has the most game experience. He has like a 12-year-long career of programming in more kind of AAA contexts.
Oh, wow.
So, but the writers and myself... we are coming from like we've worked together for almost 15 years now in different capacities, and so we come from experimental theater. Like I personally studied music in school, and so like I was working in kind of music-ish kind of areas as well, but yeah, so we're not so it's half and a half. But the half where we're not from games, we all kind of largely grew up playing games, but we somehow ended up doing experimental.
Yeah. So this is interesting for two reasons. One, it is at this point like a fun fact that like everyone knows that like, did you know Nintendo goes out of their way to hire people not from the games industry? I mean, this shit is why, because you are coming to a very not worn, but like a medium with a lot of tropes. People expect, like, if it's a game, I'm using gun
box
or sword.
Puzzles.
I'm pushing blocks to get it in the little place where the block goes down a little bit, and then I get an orb. And when you come from outside of that, and you're not like you don't have 10 years of like I gotta make gun. You are more likely to make something refreshing and original, as 1,000 Times Resist is. But on the other hand, how the fuck the marketing of this game and like the money, like how did you get a money man on the scene for this? Because you need a money man, you need logistics guys to like do the heavy lifting of like getting the game out there, getting it on the storefronts, and like what was that like? Because like this is a tough game to describe because you don't want to spoil the story because that's like the main part.
Well, we had pitched to a couple of publishers, and I think Fellow Traveler was one that was interested in a way that they were interested that we were not. They were already open that we were not coming from video games. And
it rules. It's just like, you're not? You don't do it? I love it because I hate these things.
I mean, the thing about certain publishers is that they're gamers too, right? They're looking they're chasing the dragon too. So that we got super lucky. Like it was like right timing as well. There was a very specific time in 2020 when you could like I guess you could still do this. I'm not caught up yet on what the new protocols are, but you could just like cold email and pitch a publisher, and they would play the demo and respond to you. Like even if they rejected you, right? What's like getting a rejection in the first place is like a revelation.
Yes.
Because in music and in literary, kind of industries, you send a letter or whatever, even to a literary agent or whatever, you're going to end up in a slush pile. But in games, they play through the slush piles, which is wild to me, right? It reminds me of like 1950s literary industry or like music from the early 2000s where you could like send a short story to an editor and you would get discovered as a writer. And, like,
you get in Harper's and paid $5,000.
Yeah.
It just seems deranged. You could send a stranger your like 300-page manuscript, and they're like, "Oh, I'll sit down and knock." Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. And you send them like one of 3 copies that you made. And I don't know how the world worked back then. I don't know how anybody did anything. But that was one of the nice things about there was infrastructure for this. And at least so far still, we have infrastructure. It seems to me that we have some infrastructure for this in indie games. It's all very precarious. So it's always just like, for players and for people who like indie games just to buy them because we don't want it to turn into, at least I don't want this to turn into what happened to music, where it's just like it's just impossible to make any money making music anymore. And it's sad because it's at the same time you have all the tools, you have more tools available to you than ever before.
But they all go into a box no one can see.
And it's so I was worried that indie games would turn into that eventually, or games would turn into that. But thankfully so far it's still nice that gamers still want to buy games. Like they'll pay $20 to buy a game. And that agreement needs to hold.
I guess. I mean, because like as an outsider who does not work in the game industry, the games industry looks like a big like hell factory that makes you die. At least AAA games are like fucked, folks.
They
like,
both seem not good to work at, but then like actively non-viable.
Right.
Do you think that will like be a boon in any way to like giving more space to indie stuff, or these things are so huge?
I mean, that's one of the interesting things about what happened recently when we released at a very intense time as well. Like it wasn't planned that we would be releasing with literally like 6 other very hyped up indie games.
Yes.
Like
that
Animal
was a great
Well,
day.
Crow Crunchy, Crypt Master, that cat game. What is it called? Little Cat, Big City. I'm kidding. Little Kitty, Big City. All of these really hyped up indie games kind of released on the same day, and I guess it was turned in, like there was enough momentum, like it turned into this like strange cultural moment of like, oh, indie games could maybe take the place of AAA games. I mean, that's already happened to me for many years. Like I don't really play AAA games. I like largely play. Well, that's not true. I play like largely just like From Software games, and then the Final Fantasy VII remakes. When
From Software is in its own league.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not like a Ubisoft. We're not talking about like Assassin's Creed
we're not talking about. Yeah, it's true. So I do think that if I don't know what a normal, average gamer how they think about games. I know like I don't do a lot of like say market research that way of like how many games do they buy. But I know that they largely don't buy that many games, and they like buy one game and they maybe play it for like 12 months or whatever.
Yeah,
which is really opposite to my behavior, where it's like I'm buying small indie games all the time. But you can kind of see this like with books, right? Like people who read books, they're like going to the library, taking out books all the time, buying books. It's just a thing that they're
The part of the thrill of the art is the process of discovery. You're always on the march forward.
There is one thing about AAA I wanted to say that Tom and I talk about this kind of frequently. It came up again because your game does this very well. We were saying how your game has a wonderful sense of space, by which I mean like the environments feel like they are polished with intent, and they just like they're just good, right?
You spend a lot of time in them, you get to really know them.
Yes. The game that I thought would have had an amazing sense of space, which had nothing for me and was a dud, is Control. And Tom also kind of agrees on the basis that, like, okay, the environment is like 60s CIA House of Leaves building. That kicks... Oh, there's no computers and everything's tube operated. That should be awesome. But, like, the space felt so whatever. It had this like, that AAA... If I said AAA feel, like it's polished, but who cares? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely know what you mean. Where, and again, like I think this is just like, my armchair kind of thinking out loud about this, where, sometimes, and then we can get into this, like, people getting lost in the orchard thing as well, because
I got lost, folks. I got lost.
No, and people get lost, and that's kind of like, it's interesting. A lot of these spaces, they're, one could say that the spaces in Control are like really well designed, right? Like, they're designed around the encounters. They're designed so that you move through them very cleanly. They're designed with very clear vantage points of like where you should go and look and where you
It's like a theme park ride is the issue.
Yeah. So it's like a real theme park thing. And then it really, I don't know, like the space kind of exists for you to move through it in a way that's like it didn't like pre-exist before you being there and having its own kind of strange logic and this is something that I feel really kind of like, this is something I think about a lot, where we talk about what are some of the we try to understand what are some of the unique aspects of the fact that we're making games with software. And a lot of the things that people bring up in terms of like what makes it what makes games unique are kind of not 100%. Like, I'm even thinking about like, I love TTRPGs and I love, playing TTRPG video games. But that those are things that can pre-exist outside of it. We're just doing it at at a speed. Of course, I'm being reductive here.
I see what you're saying. You're saying this way to tell a story can only be done at this point in time. It's not like it is recapturing an analog thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, or it's like I feel like there's something about video games that, as a software medium or however they've turned out, that the real kind of unique aspect of it is that you can experience a coherent space. And I've said this before. I think I said this on that you can like experience a coherent space for a long duration of time.
Yes.
And you go look at a TV show, it's like a set, right? They're designed so that the moment that you like go through a door, like if you go through a door on Deep Space Nine, like it'll just be like the Paramount lot, right?
Yeah.
And but obviously here, we have some version of this. Like if you look behind a certain wall in the orchard, it's just like a skybox, right? But there is a general sense of coherency inside of that space that you have to live through and move through, and you kind of imprint it. And you get the sense when you travel to a new place, or if you go to a city, you don't immediately know it, but as you start to understand it and learn it, there's this thing that happens in your brain, and you memorize that space. And I feel like this is something that I really enjoy, and maybe like I'm a little bit of an outlier in regards to like I have a really good sense of direction, and also I can make these mental like this is just something I actually attribute it to the fact that I played a lot of video games, and specifically like 90s MMOs when I was younger. Like I was playing EverQuest, and I'm like, I can still tell you what Freeport looks like,
Wow.
Or Quanos, or like, like how do I get from Freeport over to take the boat over to the island and like walk over to the Dwarf City or walk over to the Elfin City, whatever. I can't remember their names, but like that kind of experience of virtual spaces, what I always kind of thought as video, like maybe I'm kind of naive in the sense that I am a 90s kid who played MMOs when MMOs were aspirational as a thing that was happening, right? Like playing EverQuest and Star Wars Galaxies and experiencing kind of a coherent, consistent space with multiple people was something that I really thought was like, this is the future, right? Like this is like this. But of course, MMOs became theme parked as well, right?
Everything is dungeon runs with random people that get dropped in at the start, and like I used to play MMOs, like the thing in like Vanilla WoW where you're like, hey, we're 4 guys, we need a fucking healer.
Yes.
Please, if you are interested, hello. They're like, to do that sucked. But also, like...
That was the best part. That was why you played these games.
It was real.
But, like, yes, exactly. Like, the logistics sucked, but I also, like, met people... Not, like, have long friends as a result, but when you have to round people up, you talk to people.
You would also get something weird where, like, you have the party... I mean, much has been said about party finders. Like, I didn't play WoW to the point where there was party finders in that game, but I played Final Fantasy 14 and there's party finder in that, right? And you just like kind of queue up and you like, I don't know, lounge around somewhere and you get thrown in with like a perfect party, like a perfect party. And I also played on a really advanced server. So like the tank was always just like perfect, like just, and I was just going through the motions. Whereas like in WoW, I remember exactly what you're saying, or EverQuest was exactly the same way. You're like chilling outside the dungeon, and you're like, I want to do this dungeon, but we need this. Yeah, we need a healer. We need whatever DPS maybe. But then you go into this dungeon, and there's like 3 tanks, and like an underleveled healer.
That shit rules. And like one guy's like, I'm so high right now.
Yeah. and you have an experience that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right.
There was Booty Bay Booty Bay was the town in World of Warcraft. There was the pirate themed dungeon. I remember we got through that cheesing. Like a shaman isn't supposed to tank, but like we were like, no one's fucking coming, man. So get in there.
So you're gonna try and make do, which is like something that I wish games still did more of. Like, and this is maybe like a very specific player. Like one of the writers is very opposite to me. Like, they always want to min-max everything to the max, like just like truly be in control of optimize, where I'm just like, you know what, let's just go in there and like fuck around and see what happens. And
the 2 genders.
Yeah. And so like this thing, one of my favorite gaming memories of all time is I was playing EverQuest and I was like 12 or whatever, I don't know. And I didn't know what I was doing because I was 12. and I got caught out walking when the sun set. And because I was playing a human and I was like, didn't know what I was doing, and I was like, didn't know anything. A human cannot see in the dark in EverQuest.
That's the same as here. That's too.
That's the same as. So you can't see in the dark. So it's literally pitch black, right? and so you're like, oh, I'm gonna get got in this forest.
Because you're just T-posing in the woods, waiting to be stabbed.
And then what happens is like a random, another player, like a dwarf, shows up, and they're like, oh, they like clearly also got stuck out in this darkness, and we both cannot see in the dark, right? Like, I think the only people could see in the dark was like a dark elf, or like you had to have like a light, which we both did not have because we're noobs. Mm-hmm. And so, we decided to party up and try to survive the night. But the thing that was really intense was that we could not understand each other, because EverQuest did this thing back in the day where if you were human and you didn't speak Dwarvish, and if you had a dwarf, you didn't speak like whatever they called human language, they would scramble your text.
Oh, that's so good.
And so
WoW had this kind of, but it was like for fun and like not as restricted. So you describing this is making me realize what I miss most about MMOs, which is when you go to a location and then you wordlessly work with another idiot.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you try to make it happen, and we somehow survived. Like, we did it through emoticons, or so like motions and stuff like this. But what was really magical was that over the period of time we were stuck out in the forest, because you start to learn the language if you just are in proximity of somebody typing, that like over that night I start to see more words come through, and I was like,
Darmok and Jalad.
That's all the shit that goes away when it's just dungeons.
And so like that's, I don't know why I'm on this. I guess the whole point is that about space and about like these inconveniences in gaming that like make this experience like more lifelike, or more these interactions. I don't know if players have patience for it these days, but
my gut says no, on the basis that like everyone has become accustomed to this type of party finder stuff, so everyone has small brains as a result, and like if you try to be like, hey, this game's about waiting,
I mean, well, okay, what about counterpoint from Software? Elden Ring, huge hit, a very player hostile game that was just like, you gotta fucking figure this shit out. You can go anywhere.
From Software is its own category.
But I will say that I feel like Elden Ring is the most friendly of From Software games.
Yeah,
and that was also the one that compared to most games.
I do want to quickly go back to Control, because us not liking controllers are our most cancelable opinion, and I know multiple listeners are like sharpening their fucking... Or no, they're not sharpening anything. They're getting their Shinzo Abe devices ready. They're taping up the barrels. Let me just say, so the thing that Control does that could make it great, to me, I know you think it's great, listener, the fact that I don't want to shoot a gun in Control. I don't want there to be gun. When we're talking about, like, it feels like a theme park. It feels built for you. And when it should be this weird, the space should be the main character of the game, is because you have to have video game levels where you shoot enemy with bullet in the game. And I know that's probably, they were required to do that in order to be able to publish a video game, because they don't want a AAA game where you go around and talk and look at a space, because people don't like that. But like, I think if Control had the same sort of story and art direction, but the gameplay was like 1,000 times Resist, where you just chill in a space and have plot happen, and you don't have to shoot a gun, like that to me would be a 10 out of 10
And the thing is, it has those bits a little bit, because there are little outposts within the House of Leaves building where people are just hanging out because they're like, this sure is wacky here, and like you get a little bit of that.
Then you got to shoot a gun in a level.
Then you got to shoot a gun. Like in a game where you can throw filing cabinets, I don't want a pistol.
Yeah.
People always say, like, Tom, you complain about the gun. Don't you know you can throw filing cabinets? I'm like, that's just a differently shaped gun. That's just a gun where the bullets are looking different. It's the same. Am I shooting a projectile straight ahead of me? Okay, that's boring. I don't care.
I mean, one of the goals of 1,000 times Resist was just trying to lead with stories so much so that we were just warping literally every game thing to it as possible. So one of the challenges was also trying to and this could make people roll their eyes, but like just trying to completely reduce the ludonarrative dissonance as much as like it's just like literally, and so much so where it's like some chapters are truly you're just walking around because like this is like what is happening right now, and this is all you can do because you've not done anything else, and just trying to close that gap as much as possible. And I think one of the other reasons why I can understand why maybe people don't do it, beyond the fact that it can some players may be like, well, there's no game here, is that it's actually really hard. we learned that it was really hard because like even though you're just quote unquote just you walk around, but like every encounter and every moment inside of that thing has to be somewhat thought about and made. Every conversation is unique. You got to stage people in different places. You can't just like, and the pacing of it has to be done that way. Like you're largely making pacing with unique bits as opposed to certain types of things that you could reuse. And so that's the other thing, we wanted to do with the game was that, I played a lot of walking simulators in my day, and of course they've fallen somewhat out of fashion since their heyday, like in 2010 or whatever, whenever Gone Home came out. And one of the things that was always the situation, like that was an act of subtraction as well. And so I think I'm just getting to the point here is that like, we're always about like what can we throw in games as opposed to what can we subtract from our understanding of them. Because when we subtract something, we do have to put ourselves in a position of like, okay, well, how do we make play without that thing that we thought everything was always about?
Exactly why I am always enamored by the idea of demakes, because the idea is to remove enough, as much as you can, either graphically or gameplay wise, and it still is like standing up as a reference of the original.
And you look at Gone Home, and that was essentially BioShock but no gun, right? Like, right, or System Shock with no gun, and it has that kind of genealogy. At least the people who worked on Gone Home
I didn't know
used
that.
to work at Take-Two or whatever, Take-Two Marin or 2K Marin. Who knows? Not Take-Two, 2K Marin. And they just kind of wanted to take the kind of, or at least it seemed to me from a player's perspective, they were taking like the kind of storytelling they were doing in BioShock and BioShock 2, I guess. Saying no gun, right? Yeah. And then we also had things like, Dear Esther, I always pronounce it wrong, and Firewatch and all that stuff happening at the same time. But outside of Firewatch, one of the things that I'd always noticed was that all of these games were kind of told in a way that it wasn't happening immediately in front of you.
Yeah, like you're reading journals of what occurred, which is a level removed, I guess.
Yeah, like the important event is not something that you're moving through immediately, which was something for us when we were doing 1000 Times Resist. It was like, okay, well, let's try to, like, let's engage in the interests of the walking sim again, because there was a real fall off of that kind of thing. Not 100%, but not as it was. But like, let's make sure that it's like whatever is happening to the player right now. Yeah. Even though maybe it's happening in the past or whatever, but like you're experiencing it as it's happening. Yeah.
Because like if especially in the early game of 1000 Times Resist, like watcher's job is to watch, is to go and look at flashbacks. So you might be like, oh, classic, like this is like Edith Finch. I find my brother's room and I flash back to how he was fucked up. But it is, again, like I said, the story you're presented with at the beginning is not what the story is. And it is very much like what's happening now. And that is, again, another way it plays with your expectations. It surprises you. What a good game.
I really like the framing early on of you doing this memory as, like, you are both the All-Mother and the Watcher. So it's like people are reacting to you. It's a nice way to, again, as we kind of said, feed tasty bits of info that might otherwise be kind of hard to like line up sequentially. It's cool. It was well done.
Thank you. Like that first chapter was really challenging that way.
I do want to say before we move on, because we said it off mic, and I thought it was a genius thing, that part of why I think AAA games are fucked, not only because of the logistics of the industry, how like, oh, it's impossible for these to turn a profit anymore because of how long they take and how much money they take, and also all the layoffs we do. But like we were talking about like what's interesting, like what is interesting about these demakes. They're taking things away, they're introducing limitations, and especially if you are an artist, if you have made art. And you put your entire effort into it, you understand that a limitation is an asset, not a hindrance.
It's like a bunch of choices like settled for you. How wonderful.
Yeah, I know, right? You don't have to make those choices.
I mean, and that might sound like, oh, so it's taking, cognitive load away from the artist. But I would argue, no, that it forces you to make choices differently than you would have already. I mean, especially if you know yourself, it's very difficult to not just make the choices you're comfortable with. And obviously you would like to try to do it the other way, but eventually sort of the momentum of your project brings you back to this familiar place. This is the theme
I feel like the chapter by chapter approach helps you mitigate that like momentum of going back to the comfortable. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it does, because like, we do get to be cyclical about it. And we thought there would be 10 chapters, but we didn't really 100%. Like there were, for a time we were like, for example, without spoilers, like chapter 7 really caught us off guard. Like we got to a place emotionally in chapter 7 that we did not think we would get to so quickly. And we were like, oh shit, like, and we were truly just like in a place where it's like, now we live with the baggage that we created just immediately, and we have to kind of, as a limitation or as a kind of constraint or a rule, we now have to work ourselves through a series of events, or we have to imagine what immediately happens after this thing. Like we followed the logic of this thing, and now we're in this place where we feel like we're definitely way far off than we thought we would be, and so like now we had to make a big
This sounds like a very much play it where it lies approach in a good way.
Yeah. So, I mean, constraints, as there's always the misconception that an artist is like, oh, I have this, I can close my eyes, I can envision everything. And like, it just like ends up on which is completely false, right? Like there's, all artists that I know and all artists at every level that I know, they're constantly working with constraints. Yes. And 50% of the time, most artists that I know are doing administrative work, right? So it's like, if not more.
It's a kind of constraint, right?
Yeah, and they're having to deal with the constraints in a way that's like extremely personal. And anyways.
That's kind of what, to me, is why AAA gaming seems so unappealing. Like I would never want to play an Assassin's Creed, or like the idea of doing it is ridiculous, because I think and obviously anyone who works on these games is going to think what I'm about to say is absolutely laughable, but it feels like to an outsider, at least to this outsider, that like they're at a technological level now where like if you throw enough blood and time at it at like whatever you want to do, it can happen. Like you can make the horse react in real time to the weather that the horse is in if you just kill a couple guys like and that's a sacrifice we're willing to make. And again, it's just like the interesting thing is when we push against the boundaries, is when we like stretch what is possible and like push against something. And I feel like that's where indie games really shine, and like I hope like what we discussed earlier does continue, that like this is a space that's allowed to thrive, because like shit, if I don't get to play another game like 1,000 times Resist in my life, I'll be so sad.
There's also like no reason, but it's the case that like a game with small scope has to be indie. I'm saying it's good that those indie games are made, but like there's nothing stopping like a big studio from crushing, but they won't, because there's just not the right incentives there. It's just funny that like it's fallen to the indies to basically do it.
There's a guy on Twitter, I think Head Falls Off, who said a thing that when I saw it, I was like, this is engraved in my heart, which is like, there is no reason Square Enix couldn't make Final Fantasy 17 a pixel art RPG.
Yeah,
like, just do it. Yeah. It'll take you
I would
8
eat
months.
That shit up.
Yeah. And yes, just do it. Just do it. You can do a big fucking cinematic thing that loses all the money that you have saved up for 18. Okay, that's fine. But like 17, just like, you have the staff still. Just like,
they should do the Call of Duty thing. It's like the main team makes the big one, and then the Black Ops team, the B Squad. The B Squad can make the pixel one because it's fun. Whatever.
Well, they have Octopath Traveler. The team that makes Octopath Traveler. Maybe they should give Final Fantasy.
That game should just be Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Yes, because the problem with Octopath Traveler is that the writing is such an afterthought, and it's like, I love the combat system. I love the jobs. It's so crunchy.
It looks amazing.
I love the art.
My issue is that even though it's the central premise of the game, it literally feels like you're starting a game 8 times.
Right.
I just can't.
That's the thing that absolutely like blows my mind. Like, you cannot possibly be telling me, Square Enix, that this is the best you can do, because I know that you can do a pixel art RPG with a huge cast. And it grows naturally. It's called fucking Final Fantasy VI, assholes. You did it 25 years ago. More than that, probably.
And those guys are still around.
Yeah. Jesus. God damn. So one thing I bet you hear a lot and are very sick of hearing, and you're going to hear again, is that the hub world, the orchard, the bunker that all the sisters live in, is very confusing. Speak on that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we've already talked about this. I don't know, like, about space and games, and like, while we very intentionally did not include a map at the beginning, because it was something where, we wanted people to learn that space, internalize it a little bit, and then when that space changed, it would be meaningful. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect. I mean, we did have some, playtesters kind of raise that. It was an issue. We tried to solve it with the waypoint thing, but then at some point we also kind of got to a place where we're like, oh yeah, this is actually a huge design challenge in that we like made it a circle, mm-hmm. and then of course in the middle it's not. There's like 2 areas that are not accessible to each other, right?
That was like making me go nuts, and like, I see her there. Like, yes. Can I get there?
and I think when Kodai and I were talking about it early on, it was really like, okay, well let's try to make a space where it's like in certain places in Hong Kong and certain places in Japan, you can easily get lost.
Yeah,
you just get lost, and then you just don't know. You just kind of eventually wander around. Eventually, the more you exist in that space, the more you realize it just maps out in your brain, and then it's fine. Which is kind of the experience we want people to be having, but we totally understand that like it's not happening for everybody. So I
did get turned around, but my perspective on it, which is why I didn't take an issue with it, is because the point is to interact with as many people as you can. So if you're like, well, I don't know where I'm going anyway, like, it's just like, give me the dialogue, give me some context. So it didn't really matter like where I was going so much as I was just going.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the game does a great job of making those sort of like what you would think of as minor NPCs. Like the characters, like obviously like Knower and Healer, the characters who are your sisters with the color-coded outfits, like they are significant characters. But then there's like Nervous Shell and like Forgetful Shell, and I'm like, these are like silly shells. This isn't major characters. But then you realize that like, oh, I can talk to Forgetful Shell after every plot event, and she always has something new to say. And some of these plot events are really having a major effect on Forgetful Shell's life. And like, actually, Forgetful Shell was a main character all along. Oh my God. I'm so glad I talked to her all those times. Now when like oh God, this is not that big of a spoiler. Now that some time has passed and she references things that happened then, I'm like, my God, oh, to be so innocent. It's yeah. I mean, so there's that.
Yes. I think, I will say that this is maybe, like, I don't know when you're going to release this podcast. You might get a scoop on this, is that we'll be putting a map in in a patch.
Okay.
So like, I don't know when that patch is coming. Probably sometime next week.
Okay.
And the way that it works is that it will be a map that you can bring up, but you can't move while you're looking at it. But it does tell you where you are while looking at it. So the idea is, I guess, we've kind of admitted to ourselves that, like, the actual layout, I will say, even for me, when I saw the map, I was like, oh yeah, I guess this is how it is.
Love that shit.
I was like, this is, oh, okay, like, because in my brain, I had mapped it this way, but, if we on paper, it looks like this.
Okay, now, folks, hearing this, you really have no excuse. You gotta buy this game. I will say that when the first tooltip for, like, press L button, I think it's L button, and it'll bring up the waypoint finder. And I pressed L button and saw what it was. And I said, "Oh, fuck this!" And I never used it. I'm just like,
The one thing I appreciated on there is that at least there was, like, here are the waypoints that are literally above you, vertically speaking.
Yes.
Here they are below.
Yes.
And I was like, that should be bog standard always. It is not.
Like that. I mean, the waypoint, even, like, obviously the most egregious version of the orchard is one without a waypoint and without a map, which is what we had for a very long time. And then, like, we started slowly getting people being like, oh yeah, I get lost. And we're like, okay. And as you say, like, the waypoint is one of these weird things where it's like, you put it on the screen, it's on screen, and then I've seen people just kind of try to beeline straight to the dot. And I'm like, that's not, like, if that's, even in, like, real life, if you are on one side of the street and there's, like, a building in between where you got to go, it's like you cannot walk through the, and this is the other interesting part, is, like, it's also that I've thought about this, where it's like, where do people live? What's their experience with their immediate environments? Like, do they live in a more kind of grid-based city? Do they live in a place that does have winding roads that are not, like, immediately logical, right? All of this experience with space kind of affects how they interact with video game spaces as well. It's like stuff they bring in. But we definitely wanted to avoid a real-time mini-map, because
yes, then you look at that.
My experience of that has always been in any games where it's like Google Maps. Like, if you're always using Google Maps in a new city, you'll never learn the city. And you'll never kind of build a mental map for yourself. And even in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like in a tiny town, and I'm just, like, relying on that mini map to get around.
Yeah, you end up looking.
Yeah, it's what you end up looking at. Yeah,
like any the boy. Sorry, folks, the boy's showing up. We got boy on camera.
We got
hi Winnie. Hi to boy. Oh, he cute as hell. Nice. Like any sort of open world game, any Grand Theft Auto, any The Witcher. I'm looking 100% at that mini map. I'm like Zelda. The reason that the new Zeldas hit so hard, in addition to all the reasons they're great, it's because you can turn that shit off, and it's like, whoa, I'm in a world. Like, I'm actually outside. Well, not really
I'm
outside. You get me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone also who played Breath of the Wild without the mini map. So that's
so good.
I mean, I played it with it, and it obviously makes life easier, but I'd be lying if I wasn't saying there's parts where I was just, like, only looking at the mini-map and effectively not playing the game. Not seeing this huge, gorgeous world, and I'm like, I don't care. I got to go towards the dot.
So we will have a map, though, but not real-time.
That's, I think, a good compromise.
Yeah.
That doesn't totally cheapen the effect. I will say that how do I put this in a way that's not a spoiler? When we find out what Old Town means, that was just like, oh, yes. Like, just put the themes in the game. Just say it. It's like, I love it. Because, like, throughout, you see these signs that are like, this way to Old Town. I'm like, I wonder what Old Town is. And, like, in the beginning, you just can't get to it. And it's just like, I guess that's I don't know what that is. That's something. Maybe I'll learn about it later. And then like later, you're in a new place, and I'm like, how the fuck are we here? This doesn't make sense. And then it's like, then you leave and you go to, oh, that was Old Town. This is where the signs were pointing to all along. Oh my god, that's like, again, talking about getting to know a space and then something being different.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I think like really you feel strongly in video games in a way that you can't feel in other mediums.
That's good as hell.
Sicko mode, sicko mode, sicko mode. Sicko mode, sicko mode, sicko mode. Sicko mode, sicko mode, sicko mode. Sicko mode, sicko mode, sicko mode.
So one thing about this game that absolutely owns is a very rare beast, and is that it is pandemic art. It's not about the pandemic, but it's not about the pandemic. That actually like is the sort of lazy rule of thumb is like, oh, pandemic art is bad because it's dated, because it's just going to be about like, do you remember when we wore masks? Do you remember that? Remember when you were in your apartment? Remember that? And everyone goes, yes, I was there. You don't need to tell me again, man. But this is pandemic art that like does not make you feel that way, and instead makes you feel like you're watching something that kicks ass in a big way, because we're focusing not specifically on, like, it's not like in Glass Onion where they're wearing masks and you're like, that happened to me. It is obviously a sort of sci-fi heightened version of there being a pandemic, but what we're focusing on is more of like those ineffable feelings that we all experienced, rather than the specific
like literally
signifiers.
I am at home.
Yes.
With the yes.
Like you spend a lot of time in Iris's tiny apartment, but it's not because they're quarantining, but the fact that you're spending a lot of time in the tiny apartment is giving you a feeling that is very it really hits.
Well, I mean, what's kind of interesting is that chapter 2, even though it's like not happened, like they're not in quarantine in chapter 2 in Iris's home apartment. I feel like, having lived through the pandemic where I was trapped in a very small apartment, or quarantined in a really small apartment, like prepared me to do that level. Right. Because like, this is another thing we did with chapter 2 in apartment, which is like, there are a couple of reasons why we did it that way. One was like, okay, in high school there was a big space and then there was like 2 timelines. What if there was a really small space and there was a bunch of timelines? And the other aspect of it was like, we see a lot of homes depicted in media or whatever, and they're like nice homes, right? Like it's like the classic like
it's a detached home.
Yeah, yes. It's like it's or even Friends, right? Like on Friends, like their apartment the is like nice. Whereas, I was pretty intent on trying to get like the layout is based on like a real kind of like Vancouver-ish kind of new-ish apartment. It's like barely a 2-bedroom kind of place that they'll hike up the price because it's 2 bedrooms, right?
Yeah.
But like square footage wise, it's like maybe around the same as 1 bedroom. I guess what I'm saying is that, like that the way that the pandemic, outside of the literal virus in the game, like it really was, as you say, about us trying to transmit the feelings or kind of even just explore and understand for ourselves like what happened and what was happening and how has this changed our brain and how has this changed, and we're still like unpacking that now. It's like 4 years, and not even that much later, like maybe 2 years when we were still a little bit like really, and for some people it's still kind of still happening, right? And so it was definitely a sense that like it was not how I thought a pandemic would play out, at least we were very lucky or privileged, at least in the West and North America. Like for some of us, imagine if this happened before there was internet, right? Or before there was before there was Animal Crossing, before there was all of this
stuff. They
stuff.
really timed that shit. Maybe they were in on it. But like I can think of no company had a better timed release for COVID other than Animal Crossing. It's just Nintendo crushed it.
Yeah, but like there's this feeling in Thousand Times Resist that is like when you look at the society that is set up in the orchard in the start of the game, it's very static. There's nothing is changing and nothing could change, and it feels like someone has pressed pause on the world.
Yeah,
and part of that is that you can't leave. And like the only thing that'll ever happen is you have sisters who do the task, and you're always going to be here. And like, it's just I love that it gets to a feeling that I don't think a lot of people want to talk about because it's bad. It's unpleasant, which is I think why people sort of like bristle against pandemic art that like shows someone in an N95 and it's just like I know about that. Get that out of here. Because it's like it's traumatic. Like sorry, it is. But like getting to use. I mean, isn't this what sci-fi is all about? We use these funny made up beep boop shit to like get at the core, and I love it. I think it's really good.
You can get at the core by the first 2 quests in the log, top notch, because it's go to gym, confront the entity. I like it. Been muttering that to myself a lot.
Go to the gym, confront the entity. Something else I want to talk about is, so we mentioned this briefly, but like this is I assume that a big vector of this game's success is that it seems to have caught on word of mouth wise. That's why I bought it, because I saw someone post like, I think 1,000 Times Resist is a absolute masterpiece of video game storytelling everyone should play. And I'm like, that sounds like I like that. And yes, I did. And now you, listener, are hearing about it now through the words that my mouth say. But like, what was the marketing strategy before we knew that there was like some word of mouth that had traction? Because like I said this in the document, but I'm gonna say it on mic. I had a friend over and we got to play 1,000 Times Resist. It's so good. He's like, what's it like? I'm like, let me get a trailer up. And I put 1,000 Times Resist trailer. The first hit that came up was for some horror game fest. I don't know. Something about horror games. And I'm like, 1,000 Times Resist, not a horror game. What the hell is this trailer? And I played it, and it was like, it's trying really hard. It's taking all the sort of horror-ish lines out of context, and there's scary music behind them. And I'm just like, this is not what the game is. But I'm like, the trailer should have been, and then I realized I can't finish that sentence because I'm like, I have no fucking clue.
Oh, man. Okay. So, I mean, 100%. I think I admit this. The publisher admits this. This is a very difficult video game to market. Like for many of the reasons that we've said. Like one of them is that like it's not in one particular genre. I mean, I guess you could call it a walking simulator, but then, we can talk about like how genres sometimes just break down and are not useful for us. And then the more we lean into them, the more we just like, And so the other aspect of it is that much of it is spoilers, right? Like we can't really say, and thank God we have word of mouth in this way, because it's finally kind of that is a little bit given to the audience, which has been great. Because like, you had asked me to pitch this morning or like earlier in the interview, and I was like, I don't know. Like I would rather hear other people pitch it to each other, because like I think that's where we see this all the time when you try to tell your friends, like, I really like Vinland Saga because of the farm, right? But let me explain about the farm. And so I guess, one of the angles that seemed to was stickier was that there was all of a sudden a bunch of these narratively driven indie games that were more in the kind of survival horror. And strangely enough, the one place where walking simulators are accepted and not derided is actually horror games. Yeah. You go look at it and you're just like, nobody's going to be like, to like, I don't know, one of those liminal space games. And he's like, oh man, all you do is walk around.
I mean, Resident Evil 1 was a walking simulator. The gun is like barely in there. And using it is like, this thing sucks shit.
Yeah.
You walk like a forklift. It sucks.
And so like, that's the interesting thing about, these horror games that like are quite popular on Steam, is that, and a lot of them are really very much just like walking simulators. It's not a coincidence that the people who made Dear Esther, they also went on to work on some Amnesia games, right? And so like, it's anyways, I guess that was kind of in a lot of people were like, oh, this game reminds me of Signales, which is also a kind of survival horror thing. And I would say it's reductive to call it that, but like, so that's why we were angling in on some of this, where like maybe some of the people who would kind of come to play it. But I think now, like, that it's out in the world, like I think I finally was just like, with that last trailer that we released with the song, I think it was the first time where we were like, okay, this feels like somewhat true to the game, right? And it doesn't feel like we are trying to make the game something, trying to push it towards something that it's not. But I'm very relieved that it's now kind of, we can advertise or market the game by quoting what other people are saying about it.
Yes, testimonials and shit. Because for me, here is literally what a successful marketing campaign that translated to a sale was for me. Again, I saw someone say, this game's great. If you like video game storytelling, play it. I'm like, I do like that. I went on Steam. I saw the like the hero art with the X with what I thought was one face wearing four things. But was it? You don't know. And then I saw the auto playing trailer where the first thing that happened was Watcher stabs All Mother in the back and she die. And then I go, okay, this game owns. I'm getting it. Like, this is it. And I just having quotes with like laurel wreaths around them. That's gonna do a lot. That
was a brazen thing for us to do, because I think I was just working on that trailer when we had learned about those nominations, and so I kind of like threw them in. I do, it's tough because like the game was not, and this is something, I think indie game developers will tell you, like, if the game is not, if it can't have a hashtag wholesome, if it cannot have hashtag horror, if it cannot have hashtag city builder, like that, like you have these things that are quite developed, like wholesome games, for example, is like really well developed, right? And if you can fall into the wholesome category from a marketing perspective, it's really great because they have a whole infrastructure for this. But the closest thing that we could ever get to something like that was Little Naricon with Fellow Traveler, where it was like, oh yeah, here's a festival of games about narrative games. But most of the time, like Steam doesn't have, like Steam has like a horror fest, visual novel fest, roguelike fest, but they truly don't have like a story driven fest. And I honestly, I don't know how many games would fit in there, because you start to get a strange distinction between like, okay, VNs and other things, like because I would consider something like Outer Wilds as story driven.
Oh my god, Outer Wilds is one of the best games of all time. Do we love Outer Wilds in this house, folks?
I love Outer Wilds. It's so, I could talk for days about it. And but like, would that be in that scenario, right? Would that be in it? So it's really tricky, because it's weird, because you think about like when you first thought about the interactive medium, like when you back in the 90s, or I don't know, whatever, like the vogue genre, at least from what I could tell at the time, was point and click adventures, right? Like everything was getting a point and click adventure, right? There was like Star Trek 25th anniversary, there was like Indiana Jones, there was all those LucasArts games, and then it changed. So I think it was, I don't know what exactly. Someone who's charted this a little bit better than me can go into more details about like why it changed, and like probably around the time when Doom and the demo disc for Doom started circulating. I don't know where I'm going. But Jan's saying that marketing this game was really difficult. I'm so relieved that I can now just leave it to the players to do that in a way that... And they've been doing such a great job. I really want to thank them here. I want to thank everybody who has asked somebody to play this game. Because,
I'm going to keep doing it. Talk about, we don't market this podcast because it kind of feels like, and maybe this is just the defeatism talking, that I'm trying to justify it to myself why I don't do more, but it feels a lot like nothing really works other than someone saying, hey, my friend, you should look at this because it is of
Right.
high quality. And then they say, okay, I will do that because I trust you.
Yeah.
Like, because, I had older projects that I did, like, podcast best practicing marketing for, and
Right.
all that did was waste my time and money. It did not do anything. And
Right.
I don't know. I mean, like, it sort of, like, it feels doomy, and this doomy might be the wrong word, but, like, there's sort of like a fatalism about it. It's just like, I sure hope I get lucky and like someone with some momentum hooks onto this and it
Right.
and drags it into the light. And I'm glad it happened for the 1,000 Times Resist because it has the juice. Like, folks, I cannot emphasize enough. This game kicks major ass. It is so good. You will love it. But
I mean, I think that's why we one of the very early on, even before I signed with Fellow Traveler, it's like I made a decision. It's like I kind of have to have a publisher because, like, the type of game this is going to be, it's going to be really difficult to market. And, like, it's kind of like why labels exist in the first place. Sorry, like record labels, right?
Yes.
Like, here's I don't know, an artist that you like, but here's a new artist that we signed that might be similar, like that you might like also, right? So there's like a general function for indie labels in that way that I think is really important. That being said, we did work really hard. We still had to, like, push the wish list, do all the indie dev stuff, do festivals to kind of get, like a body of wish lists to jump off from. Yeah, it was painful. Yeah. All marketing is painful, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad you did it. Here's a question. Yeah. So maybe this is not something you know yet because you're sort of in the deep exhale after having pulled off the thing. Can we expect more video games from you guys? You going back to your original mediums? You gonna do some more theater?
We're not going back. We're staying in video games, and so, or at least I'm not going back. And it's not because I don't like it. It's just because, like, one of the reasons why we wanted to switch to video games is that or at least I wanted to switch to video games, was to engage with these things on a scope that's just not possible in theater, right? Like, indie games don't have a lot of money always to make these things, but whatever you imagine the amount of money that it takes to make even something very small in video games, it's way less. Like, we have way less of that in theater. We have, like, literal, like a couple of boxes, right? Maybe if we're lucky, and, like, some computers, I guess. I mean, what I mean to say is that I want to stick around and continue making video games. Just having an infrastructure. Like, I mean, it's wild that, like, we made something that people are buying, or, like, have bought, and can be bought, I should say, just can be bought, because we're coming from a place where, like, that's not the case. So we're going to stick around and make more video games. What immediately we're going to make next, I think we're just going to probably do a kind of, like, manga one-shot style kind of thing, like a short film or short game, manga one-shot, much like, because in between, like, I'm not trying to compare in this way, but this is a good model, like, in between the mangaka for Chainsaw Man, like, he did these 2 one-shots, or maybe just more, but I think it was 2.
Yeah, Look Back and Goodbye Eri.
Yeah. And between part 1 and part 2, am I an anime sicko? I am, I guess. Yeah. So those one-shots where you start to see some of those one-shots bleed into Chainsaw Man Part 2. And this is why I, like, 100% believe Chainsaw Man Part 2 is way better than Chainsaw Man Part 1. And I don't know, there was just something that he learned there. So we kind of want to do these one-shots similar and kind of learn a little bit, do a little bit smaller scope before kind of doing another big thing. So that's currently the plan, at least.
That kicks ass. I'm so pleased to hear this because, I am, like, locked in. I can't wait to see what's next. It's going to be good as hell, folks. And with that, I believe that's all the time we got for Anime Sickos, because we've been going for a while, and I'm getting tired and I'm hungry. Also, Joe's holding the little baby boy, Ivan. Yeah. He's so well behaved.
He's doing good.
Perfect.
He's doing good.
So, Remy Sue, thank you again for joining us. It was, I'll say it, a slam dunk. One of the great episodes of Anime Sickos, in my opinion.
Nice.
Obviously, people can go buy 1,000 Times Resist on Steam, and is it on anywhere else?
Nintendo Switch, and GOG and Epic.
Hell yeah. You should go do that because it rules in a big way. I have a friend of mine who literally, he is in Vancouver and moved from Hong Kong as a child to Vancouver. And I'm just like grabbing him virtually by the shoulder and be like, you got, like literally, if you don't play this game, I'll go insane and die. Yeah. Where can people follow you and see more of your stuff if they want to do that? Aside from just the game, of course.
Oh, aside from just the game, I guess I have a website, remysu.com. It's really an artist website. You can see some of the strange, weird things I used to do. I'm also on Twitter at remysu, REMYSIU. So you can follow me. And of course, you can follow the game on Twitter also, which is 1000x resist. I'm spelling it out.
Do it.
Yeah. So
hair to hair, folks. It was great.
Yes, heck yeah. Yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. I'm not gonna overthink it. This is the end of the show. Bye bye. I've been Tom, an Anime Sicko.
I've been Joe, an Anime Sicko.
I am Remy, an Anime Sicko.
We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Anime Sickos. I've been Tom, a sicko. You can follow me on Twitter at TomHarrison19. Joe is also a sicko. You can follow him on Twitter at Sharia Uncle. You can follow Anime Sickos on Twitter at Anime Sickos, or email us at animesickos@gmail.com. Please leave us a review or something. I don't know. Tell a friend. Anyway, until next time, bye.